the West Coast, the East Coast, and deep in the heart of Texas, it's the Geek at Arms podcast with Bryan, Mike, and James.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Geek at Arms podcast, a podcast about three guys who share a lot of geeky hobbies and also a love for the Lord our God. I'm James, and hanging out with me, as always, are my buds, Mike and Bryan. Mike, how are you doing today, my man?
Doing okay. How about you?
Oh, it's been a crazy week. Got a little impacted with the possibility of COVID in the house, but thankfully that was not the case. Everyone is healthy, and thank God for that. Bryan, how about you, my friend?
I am working again. I have income.
Oh, thank the Lord.
So much more relaxed.
I bet. Hooray, I don't have to subside merely on ramen. Now I can have ramen and bananas.
I can have ramen and noodles.
I've been existing on spice packets for 2 weeks.
I just boil water and reuse the leftover like residue on the bottom of the bowl.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of good starch in there.
Yeah. Well, let us get on with the show and get to Geek Out. I will kick it off this episode. And as I mentioned in the last one, I have been enjoying The Witcher 3 immensely. So much, I probably played a little more than I should be. I'm sure my kids will be fine. I finished the main quest, about several hundred side missions, because you can't even go to the next town without picking up like 3 side missions. And I finished the first DLC, Heart of Stone, and the final DLC, called Blood and Wine, takes me to fantasy France, or Tuscany, where romantic medievalism runs rampant like lions through the golden hills of a picturesque countryside. It's very inspired by romantic medievalism. This little duchy of Toussaint, it's protected not by a military or police, but by knights errant who all prescribe to a special code of chivalry to protect the weak and fight evil and monsters. And they ride around in beautiful plate mail that's gilded and lacquered, and everyone speaks in this high Shakespearean type of dialect sometimes, just when they feel like being pretentious, which is most of the time with the knights.
Sounds like they have added some schmancy to their fancy.
Yes, quite. But it's made for quite a bit of humor and enjoyment, some interesting side quests. And I've slowed down a little bit. I don't want to blow through this DLC as fast as I did the other one. And I've started kind of putting my eyes towards a new game as well, because once you get playing one style or genre of game, you start to kind of feel like, I want to try something else.
I have been playing and replaying Mega Man 2 since 1988. I have no idea what you're talking about.
No idea what I mean. Wrong guy to talk about that with. I am a little bummed because a couple of weeks ago, Star Wars Squadrons, which I really wanted to get when it came out, I held off because even though it came with a $40 price tag, I read that the single-player campaign was actually very short. And that disappointed me because I thought we were going to get something akin to the old X-Wing and TIE Fighter series of old. Something deep and involved. And, well, it's not the case. But, I thought, well, one day I'm going to get it, just not right now. Then I saw that it was supposed to be on sale, which it was. It was $10 off. I'm like, $30, I'll jump on that. But it was only for PC and PlayStation 4, not for Xbox.
Oh,
I'm like, fine. I'll wait. What else? Also, since our last episode, the new seasons of both Star Trek Discovery and The Mandalorian have aired. And I kind of feel like all the horribleness of 2020 aside, I feel like I'm living in like a golden age. There's a brand new Star Trek show and a brand new Star Wars show on the air at the same time.
And they're both good? ?
Yes! Exclamation point.
Wonderful.
Like, if you had told me years ago that this would happen, I would not have believed you. No way would I have believed it, but thankfully this season of Discovery has been enjoyable. The Mandalorian is just killing it, sometimes literally, week after week. And have you guys been able to catch Mandalorian?
Oh, yeah.
Only the
Good.
first episode so far.
Gotcha.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I want to spoil the everything.
Don't.
No, don't. We'll talk
Oh,
more.
no.
We'll talk
But
more
there was-
next episode. Next episode. No,
I'm in control of this recording. I'll just turn it all off.
don't make. I'm about to say, don't make me turn this podcast around.
Yeah, I can just do this. I'll just mute Mike for the next 20 minutes.
Perfect. All right. Speaking of science fiction TV shows, Joy and I have caught the first few episodes of the Netflix series Space Force, starring
gosh.
Steve Carell, and this was a lot funnier than I was expecting it to be.
It's a lot funnier than it has any right to be.
You're absolutely right. I will warn our listeners, language is an issue with it in every episode. It's not like horrible, but some, wordy dirds do get brought up here and there. But once again, Steve Carell killing it as this, 4-star general who's placed in charge of the newly made Space Force. It walks that line between making gentle mockery of the military while also trying to be respectful of it. Oh, and John Malkovich playing the head scientist, fantastic. And I've really enjoyed the interplay between those two characters.
John Malkovich really, really makes this show because you have somebody to be grounded in who wants to take all of this seriously, but he's also trapped by some of the absurd political machinations that are being thrust into their laps. And so he just has this despair for what is and the desire for what is meant to be.
And the show could so easily fall into the trope of, it's always going to be the military versus the scientific community and butting heads and always be divide between them and always combating each other. But they've done a good job, and especially Steve Carell's character, of being a lifetime military man, but also being what's the word I'm looking for?
Thingy.
Yes, thingy. He's very
Show him the thingy.
Thingy. No, don't show him the thingy. That's gonna
that was a line. That was a line because the Russian who was obviously working for the Russian who was on the team, who was obviously passing information along, is like, no, I can't show this to you. This is classified. No, you cannot see that engine part. And he gets a text from the President of the United States. Show him the thingy.
Show him the thingy.
Like, gosh, dang it.
from POTUS. Hey, show him the thingy.
Well, that was completely inadvertent because I have not seen the show.
Well done. Okay, but going back to what I was saying, Steve Carell's character shows himself to have empathy for the people under him and compassion for the astronauts and for the work that they do. We're only about 4 episodes in, and I know it's only a 10-episode season, so here's hoping that it continues in that vein. And that will wrap it up for me.
Well, I have been... Netflix announced to me that there was a new season of Sword Art Online, which is an anime about a virtual reality MMO in which all of the players get trapped in it. And if they're disconnected from their VR rig, they'll die. And if they die in the game, they'll die. And I remember pretty enjoying it quite a lot the first time I watched it. It's like, oh, there's another season of that. I haven't seen that in a while. I'll rewatch it so that I remember everything that went on. And it'll give me a few more months of cartoons on my Saturday mornings. About a week later, I'd watched all 3 of those seasons.
Oh, wow.
Plus the spin-off Gun Gale Online, and I didn't reinstalled an MMO for myself, EVE Online.
Yeah, Sword Art Online, it's really easy to just shotgun those down quickly.
Yeah, it's like, it's not that they're like extremely, extremely good. I mean, they're enjoyable, they are good, but it's just, there's something about it that is just so addictive. And I'd watch 6 or 7 episodes in a row. It's like, oh, well, there went my evening.
Well, it's what people don't realize. If you stop watching, then Netflix will kill you.
Right. Don't unplug. Do not unplug.
Are you still watching? Good. You'd better be.
We're sending you some toothpicks to prop open your eyelids.
They're being delivered by Amazon. We are now a subsidiary.
This episode is brought to you by Visine.
Exactly. It's a pretty good show. I like all the characters. it's a little disappointing at times where there's one particular character, Asuna, that she's really awesome for like really short bits of time. Like, all right, Asuna's finally going to come into her own. She's going to do some cool stuff, and we're really good. Okay, well, no, that was just like half an episode, and now she's going to be in the background for the next 6 episodes. She did get half a season to really shine, but most of the time I was just disappointed with the way they handled her.
You made her one of the leaders in this huge army, and now she's the damsel in distress, literally.
Right. She's going to be subordinate to Kirito for the rest of the season. It's like, it's like she's such a great, powerful character. Just let her do her thing.
Mm-hmm.
Save the day occasionally. So, yeah, EVE Online. I started a new character to refamiliarize myself with the game before I start taking up my old one again, because like Ennis is 14 years old now. He's got millions and hundreds of millions of credits worth of equipment and cash. And it's like, I don't want to risk him when I'm trying to refamiliarize myself with the game. So I was like, okay, I'll start a new character, brand new, so I can get reacclimated. And the first thing I do is I start exploring, and I get myself trapped inside a wormhole space and forgot my probes, so I can't get back out.
Oh no.
So I was like, okay, well, I have to reactivate Ennis after all to come rescue myself.
So I take it you had enough invested that you didn't just want to ditch that new character?
Yeah, I'd been playing for a couple of weeks, and I was like, and I did what you're not supposed to do, and I had invested everything in this new shiny spaceship and kitted it out with weapons so I could go fight in the wormhole space against the more powerful enemies there. And it's like, okay, so everything that I've done the last 2 weeks is wrapped up in this ship, so I can't just eject and warp back to my starting point and be starting from less than scratch because I can't even do the intro missions anymore. So it's like, so I have to reactivate this old character, fly all the way across the galaxy. And I'm like, in the back of my mind the whole time, like, how long is that wormhole going to be open? I've got somewhere between 3 and 7 hours to get myself out of this pickle. It's like, and I have no idea how long the wormhole is going to last. But so I did manage to get myself out. I got him out. I got her out, actually, the female character. And I managed not to get my my main character blown up.
Otherwise, if this thing had closed up, this would be the worst episode of Gilligan's Island ever.
Well, and it comes down to, I mean, if that happens, you have to either like hope that you just like stumble across another wormhole, which you can't actually find them without the probes, or you have to like shout out in the local chat, "Hey, can someone rescue me?"
Uh-oh.
And this being EVE Online,
that
the answer
could
to that
backfire
question
on you
is
real quick.
Fresh meat.
Yeah.
Then have you thought about having your like little tiny guy say, "Hey, can somebody come and help me?" And then when they show up, you have your really big dude come out and just punch the crap out of him. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a lesson to be learned there.
Well, and there's this cadre of players that I'm not entirely certain what their psychology is. They seem to be really intent on making certain that nobody new can ever play this game ever.
Oh, I hate that.
It's like, and so they go around in the supposedly safe areas and they suicide attack people because they know that they can concentrate enough fire to kill a new player before the police show up and blow up them. And it's like, okay, well, they've lost 1 million credits worth of stuff, but this new player has lost 5 million credits worth of stuff and is upset. And they get great enjoyment out of that.
EVE Online is, occasionally I will see articles about some of the bigger battles that take place in this game. And when I say bigger, I mean like PvP battles that involve thousands of people and spaceships.
Mm-hmm.
And I've even read accounts of where one person was a part of this gigantic coalition. He got mad at them, and so he set it up so this coalition was trapped and most of it destroyed before he jumped ship to another group, took all of the first group's money, and this actually ended up being translation in several thousands of dollars of real-world money being lost.
He wasn't even mad at them. He planned that from the very beginning.
So he just did it for kicks and giggles?
He was a deep cover spy for the other alliance. And he got wormed in there, and he spent 2 years in this enemy alliance working his way up in the ranks and getting access to all their stuff so that he could defect with all of their equipment.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but Mike, this is a game where you can drop real world money into it to accumulate credits, buy bigger starships, more equipment, giant bases, giant ships. And I mean, there are people out there who just dropped a ton of money into it.
I think the estimate on how much he stole was somewhere around $40,000 worth of gear that he just strictly stole, and then another tens of thousands of dollars worth of material destroyed in that battle.
Man.
Of course, not all of that had actually been purchased with real money, because these are people who've been playing for a decade or longer, and have accumulated that through just working the economy in game.
So we're talking about real world, air quotes, value.
If someone had decided to convert this into real world value, that's how much it would have been worth.
Wow.
Of course, that would take almost as much work as just doing a full-time job.
See, this is why I think that value is a completely subjective term, because I would not spend any money for that. Mm-hmm. So it's worth the value to me is zero. Right. Now, the value to you might be much, much higher than so and so and so forth.
It's worth however much you can con somebody into paying for it.
Yeah.
Right.
In any case, it's been fun. I've been enjoying it. And I have considered from time to time getting to the point where, I'm doing the PvP and I'm playing well enough that I can just start this fleet of people that come by and punish the ones who are bullying the new players. Because, there's not a whole lot of them that are going to compete with Ennis when he's fully kitted up. But I don't want to risk him in PvP before I'm ready for it,
Right.
Another thing that I've been, just in the past week, I listened to the Star Wars radio dramas.
Oh, gosh.
Always a good thing to do.
And this is the first time I'd listened to them. I'd never given them the time before. I'd heard, hey, they're really good. It's like, but, it's radio dramas. It's not really my thing. But since I was working this past week and the work that I had to do was rotoscoping, which is very boring, I put those on while I was working. And I've got to say that, what's his name? Pete King? Is that the guy playing Han Solo?
Perry King.
Perry King, right. He is, in my opinion, maybe even a better Han Solo than Ford.
He is just phenomenal in those radio dramas.
I've heard many people say, oh yeah, he made it his own and he's just as good as Ford, but he's not the same. It's like, just as good at? No, I think he might be better.
I think that he absolutely has the right characterization for the radio drama. I have no idea what he would have been like on the screen. In fact, he was in the casting pool to be cast as Han Solo for A New Hope.
And instead they cast this guy who was a carpenter for some reason. And
well, Ford had been in American Graffiti before that.
Yeah.
So he wasn't just a carpenter.
No, but he was there working as a woodworker on the set, and they asked him to step in and read some lines.
Yeah, they were missing because Lucas wanted to cast them in, have them go through the screen test in trials, and so he put them in cohorts, and so he had one group that didn't have Han Solo at any given time. So he's Harrison, just come in and read lines, so he could swap them back and forth, so they'd have even teams. And they turned out to like him in the screen test better than anybody else. But Perry King did great in the radio drama.
And all the extra exposition that they did, especially in A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, that extra time that they spent at the beginning of each of those stories. Because I was watching the time, it's like, man, this has been going on for a while. And I looked at it and was like, okay, this is 4 hours long. We're in hour 2, and they haven't left Tatooine yet. But all of that really added some extra emotional weight to it, especially to Princess Leia. And I found myself actually tearing up at a couple of scenes that, I've seen the Star Wars trilogy dozens of times. I probably am not exaggerating very much to say 100. And they've
That
never
seems kind of lowball for you.
Yeah.
I don't watch it obsessively, but
You got to pump those numbers up, bud.
yeah. But I've never had that emotional reaction to some of those scenes like I did listening to the radio drama. It really, really, really impressed me.
I liked how they gave the backstory between Luke and Biggs. They fleshed it out and gave it a weight. So when he dies in the attack against the Death Star, you really feel it. It's not just a passing moment as it is in the movie. It's a bit of a gut punch that you feel right along with Luke.
And he had more of a role in the novelization also, but
Right.
the radio drama punched it up even further beyond that. And it's interesting. I should reread the Star Wars novel because there are definitely some differences in Luke's characterization between all three versions of the story.
Somewhere in a box in my parents' attic, I've got the radio drama of A New Hope in cassette tape form.
And I'm going to break my usual pattern, and I have a fourth item for my Geek Out.
Oh.
Legend of Korra is on Netflix now, so I was like, I have never seen that. I've watched Avatar now, so I'll also do this Legend of Korra. It's really good, as everybody has said it was. But Tenzin, I want all of the Tenzin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what happens to Korra, as long as she's just there to justify me getting to see Tenzin. He's the best character.
Are all the seasons of Korra on Netflix?
As far as I know, I'm about third of the way, I think, through season 2.
We need a spin-off of just Tenzin and his airbending family.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, we all need more Tenzin in our lives.
Yes. So then, Mike.
All right, I am going to start off my Geek Out describing a little bit of geeky vandalism because I'm not usually the sort of person that just kind of pulls out a Sharpie and scrawls something on the wall, but every once in a while the opportunity presents itself that will never, ever, ever be there again. We had some pretty extensive water damage at the building that I work at, and some things happen when people generally aren't occupying the building for a month and water is trickling into an office and so forth. And so walls were getting trimmed out, and as what happens when a carpet gets soaked, you have to cut the walls, if it's sheetrock, cut it about 2 feet off the floor just to make sure that mold can't grow. Well, this building is 100 years old with different additions, and doorways and hallways have been cut anew and walled off and all sorts of things. Well, when they pulled out the section of wall, I see that there is a doorway, like a really large-ish doorway that was sealed off.
Was
And
Nicolas Cage trying to get in there, trying to find an important piece of American history?
Well...
Or maybe it leads into John Malkovich's subconscious.
Yeah.
We're getting... Oh, wow, that would be so good, but no.
Nicolas Cage trying to break into John Malkovich's unconscious.
We got to get a treatment together. Okay. We are going to steal President Malkovich. Anyway. Well, it opens up this space that is really just kind of, I don't know, 2.5 foot, maybe 3 foot by 7 foot tall, and as wide as a door frame. And I'm like, this is going to get sealed off tomorrow. Like we've got the guy coming in who's going to put up new sheetrock. So I squatted down, climbed in, and stood up, and took out the Sharpie and wrote the 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could. But when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. Which is going to get sealed off. It's sealed off by the time this podcast is out. And that is the first line of The Cask of Amontillado, which, if you're not familiar with Edgar Allan Poe, is the story where the revenge is taken by sealing a man into the walls. So in another 10, 20, 30, 50, maybe never, ever will that little scrawl ever be seen. But if it ever is, I hope that the person gets the literary reference.
Oh, that would be such a waste. Oh my gosh.
If I had had the resources and known that this was going to happen, I would have found a fake skeleton hand, gone to a pawn shop, picked up a cheap mason's ring, and sent them both to you to put in there as well.
It was Halloween time, so I was thinking about it. Like, I thought about it.
Get us over to the biology department and grab one of those plastic skeletons.
There you go.
Oh, I have another story for that for another time. Anyway. Also, since our last recording, James and I were on First Geek 411. We got an email from Shanine and the gang, and they invited us to come on, and we had a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and
we did.
They asked us to talk a little bit about historical swordsmanship, and
we talked a lot about historical swordsmanship.
Yeah, it was supposed to be in brief, but we are problematic figures.
You are who you are.
Yeah. Sorry, First Geek 411. Anyway, but we had a lot of fun. They had a lot of fun, so we had a good time.
Yeah.
And part of the formula of their show was to have a top 3, and we were talking about the top 3 swords from movies and other media. So,
which for me is very hard.
Yeah, I had to narrow it down. So we had a lot of fun hanging out with Cameron, Emma, Shanine, and Chris. So we'd encourage you to go out and check out episode 147 of their show.
Absolutely.
And what's funny is after the show, because we also were doing this on their Twitch stream, I'm looking at Cameron and I'm like, I know that he's been to PAX. I've listened to their show, and I know that he cosplay as Aang. He looks kind of familiar. And I started going through my photos of PAX, and sure enough, I had run into him at PAX and gotten a picture of him cosplaying as Aang.
No way.
Yes.
Very cool.
So that was just kind of a neat little tidbit, and it's just funny how these little areas of the Christian geekosphere intersect, and we didn't even know.
But all that to say, First Geek 411 crew, you ever want us back? That's going to be a definitive yes, anytime.
And we should probably have them on at some point.
Absolutely.
And the last bit of geekiness that I've been doing is I've kind of had this joke that my daughters and I are going to play a game called Does It Boot? We have a couple of old computers that are sitting in our basement, and I've said that what I should do is to teach them what the internal components of the computer are like, is to take it apart and have them put it back together and press the power button, and if it boots, you win. And it got a little bit more serious than just, let's do this as a side project, because my wife's computer that she had an aging computer, and it just one day turned up and quit. And she was thinking of moving to a laptop anyway and replacing it because of the problems that it was having. Well, my friend had said that he was having some problem with his computer. He thought it was the power supply. He was going to upgrade his power supply anyway. He swapped it out, and it didn't fix the problem. And it turned out to be an overheating graphics card. But then he turned up with this extra power supply. And I'm like, okay. You have an extra power supply. My wife's old computer just failed to turn on one day. I think I have an idea if you're not going to be using that power supply. So
let's get these crazy kids together.
Exactly. And so I took my youngest daughter down to the basement. We cracked the casing on this, got a can of compressed air, 2 cans of compressed air, because there was a lot of like if you have your computer sitting on the floor, don't, because
especially if you have a cat.
Yeah.
Oh, some of the pictures I've seen online. Oh.
Yeah, those dust bunnies were impressive. So we got it cleaned out, and then once I'm introducing her to this is how this power supply is connected. We're taking pictures of everything that's connected in which way, looking at the new power supply and saying, okay, this is this, this is this, this is this. At the end of that, albeit pretty long evaluation, she's like, well, Dad, I have smaller hands than you. I can get my hands into these clips and pull this thing apart and get it plugged in, and I'd have an easier time. And she wasn't wrong. And so at the end of it, we put it back together, got everything clipped in, we pressed the power button, and what do you know? The thing booted. And so we were celebrating and high-fiving and then putting the thing back together. And after we were done, my wife said, so did you get the CD out of that CD drive that I've wanted for 3 years? And I said, yes. And my youngest said, no. And I said, no.
Do you know about the manual eject button on a CD drive?
Yeah, funny that. I used the manual eject button, and the DVD drive didn't care.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be mechanical. Interesting.
Yes. Well, hold on. You're not talking about the button on the front. There's another button somewhere in the back or on the side?
No, on the front, there's a tiny little hole. If you insert something that will, like a paper clip that will fit in that hole, you can push, and it will actually physically eject the disc.
Well, hang on, guys. I got to get a paper clip. I'll be right back.
If that doesn't
check that out.
function well, I recommend you use the backup emergency eject. And that's
screwdriver?
A flathead screwdriver.
Yeah, that's. I mean, the thing is dead. So what we're probably going to do is pull that drive out anyway, and replace it with one of the other dead computers that we've. I mean, their components still work. They were just old, and they couldn't be upgraded to an operating system that was supported. So they're just parts. So, and she had a great time. That was the thing. She found it so very rewarding, and she was so proud of herself. And that was really all that I was after in this whole thing. Like,
awesome.
If it worked, it worked. If it didn't, it didn't. But the fact that she was like, this is amazing. I could do this for a job. Probably doesn't pay very well, though. Like,
yeah.
No, I mean, not as much as it used to, but...
You got the right business structure, it can, but, that's a really great idea. Back when I was doing tech support for the church, I rehabilitated many, many computers. I should have just gone ahead and taught the 6th graders how to do it.
It's funny because I never would have had the gall to do it if my dad and I hadn't cracked open a computer so many times replacing components. But before I even did the venture, I was talking on the phone with my dad, and I said, well, and one thing that she'll never have to worry about is the compatibility of COM ports. And then we laughed and laughed. And then we cried a little, and then we laughed again.
IRQ not equal to 0. What does that even mean?
Too soon. And that'll wrap it up for me in Geek Out.
Well, I think we had a listener question. Mike, would you like to introduce that to us?
Sure. We had over on our Facebook, we had listener Joshua Phillips shoot us, hey, I had a listener question for you guys. Like, I know, right? Let's start reading it. Isn't it cool? Something I've considered a lot. We often hear people wish if this book /anime /etc. could get a film, that would be great. But I wonder which series /imaginary world would be most worthy or benefit the most from being remade into a quality animated series.
Good question.
Yeah. I've got one that I've been thinking about for a while before Josh had even asked. So do you guys want to go, or do you want me to take this one?
No, take it away.
All right. I think I even hinted at this back when Bex was on the show, but I really would like to see what would happen with the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn as an anime. Because especially with the style that they have of some of the character interactions, I think would be perfect for the Thrawn-Pelion dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because as Thrawn is, Pelion is laying out, well, sir, what we see here isn't this usually what the situation is? The traditional evaluation of that is, and then Thrawn's, no. And then he gives his surprise in-depth insight that he has, and there's there's these shots that you get in anime, and this kind of guttural sound as surprise takes them. It's like, I was like, how did he come up with this? And I think that especially would be really fascinating to see on screen, and I think lends itself well to that.
Joris Sabath as a mad animated character. That would be cool to see.
Seriously? I mean, the dude is crackling with lightning anyway, and anime is going to make that extra, and that's okay. There are so many things there that I think are ready to just go, not crazy, but at least a little bit extra. And
well, if you want a blue-skinned evil military alien strategist, you've got Robotech right there.
oh my gosh, I'm just going to splice these together and then just dub over it myself.
Now I'm a little scared about Star Wars as an anime. Like, oh no, a fleet of Star Destroyers is coming in. It's the Chimera. What's it doing? It's changing. It's a Gundam!
Though, have you seen that animated fan film of somebody doing X-Wing versus TIE Fighter?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, that was awesome.
That was very well done.
I mean, you get that style, and especially you drop that into some of the space scenes. And
I would be behind that.
Right? And especially the visual style that they had made it. I mean, anime lends itself to, okay, you're looking at just a blank face of a TIE Fighter pilot. Well, why not just go ahead and turn that transparent? Like, that's one of the things that animated short did, is let you see inside the helmet of the expressions of these people. And like, you do things like that, and this could be fantastic. The licensing for that will never, ever, ever happen. But, I mean, he asked.
Well, I mean, we never thought we'd get a TV show about a Mandalorian character trying to find a new home for a Baby Yoda type character. So, I mean, don't say it'll never happen, because obviously what we thought will and will not happen is completely out the window when it comes to Star Wars.
Okay, Crunchyroll, are you guys listening? Because maybe you can hit up Disney to say, hey, this is just Legends. Nobody cares, right? Right? We can have this, right? Can we do this?
And Disney will respond, do we own Crunchyroll yet?
Actually,
no.
somebody was buying Crunchyroll. Was that you were talking about that on
Yeah, Sony.
First Geek 411, actually, weren't you?
Yeah, Sony's buying Crunchyroll.
Yeah. To which someone will say, no, sir, I believe Sony's buying that. Oh. Do we own Sony yet? Anyway.
We've been needing to get, who's got Sony have? Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Ooh, uh-oh.
You heard it here first, folks.
At some point, the antitrust laws have got to kick in. I mean, seriously.
Either that or the Disney singularity will occur, and everything will become the consciousness of Disney.
Well, the United States government has said that we can't buy Sony, so let's buy the United States instead and just get rid of that problem. The United States of Disney. Well, I mean, I have to admit, the first thing that popped into my head when I read this question was Mouse Guard.
Oh,
but that just makes me sad.
Especially when you think about that teaser animation that they put out online about a year or so ago. It broke my heart. Yeah.
Speaking of Disney acquisitions, that was actually what killed that project. It was at Fox, and they were getting ready to go into production. They were like weeks away from full production on that when the Disney merger happened, and Disney apparently thought, well, we already have a mouse. No, this is over. Yeah. But discounting Mouse Guard, I thought Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson would be a really, really cool animated show.
I agree. Yeah. I think it would make a better animated series than a book. I say that because I only made it about halfway through the book.
I did read all of this, and I really liked the follow-on series. I think I've said that before. The Wax and Wayne books, better than Mistborn. But I think all of them would be really, really great and really dynamic as animated properties. I don't think I would like them very much as films. I don't think it would work very well. Although I understand that there's an option on Mistborn for a film or maybe a miniseries. Mm-hmm. But animated, I think it could be really cool. Yeah, especially with some of the like internal Allomancer powers, like the Seekers.
Yeah.
which would be really hard to show visually in a live action. But with a stylized anime or animated show, you could show that pulsing visually in a way that I don't think you could do in live action.
There is just something about this, I think we've said this before, about the suspension of disbelief when you're looking at something that is artistically rendered that you just can't quite capture in a live action as well, in my opinion. And I have come to realize that I really like fantasy more animated than I like it any other way. I think partly because of that. But that is, yeah, I think that you're making a pretty strong case here.
Quick question, Brian: have you read any of the Stormlight archive books by Brandon Sanderson, Oathbringer, and the others?
Yeah, I haven't read the latest one, but I read the first however many.
I've been thinking about picking up Oathbringer, but considering that I kind of lost interest in Mistborn, I was looking for someone's review on it. Would you recommend it?
It's a much more solid story. It's very well put together, and his prose has improved a lot since Mistborn. Because Mistborn was his first published work.
Okay.
The world building, I didn't really connect with the world of Roshar very much, just because it's so very alien. It's like everything is based on this like crustacean ecosystem that I have a really hard time keeping the visualization in my head with it. But the characters are really interesting and complex. The main character, Kaladin, is somebody that at the beginning of the book, you're like, oh man, this is not a good person. But you start to get an insight into his psychology and who he's becoming, and you start to really appreciate him. And I think it wasn't to the level of Thomas Covenant. It wasn't like, I hate this guy and I'm going to stop reading this book because of him. He walked a nice balance on, you see the hope, you see the potential of what he can be, and he keeps you on the hook long enough to pay that off. So I'd say I recommend it, but they're not my favorite.
Okay.
So did you have a property that you'd like to see?
Only one that we've brought up so many times on this podcast, but I think that the world of the Dresden Files would lend itself best to an animated series. For a long time, we've all wanted a better TV show than the one that we got first round, but in so many of the books, we're presented with characters and with situations and concepts that are near impossible to truly convey faithfully to a live action screen without losing something to it, because the effect to bring it about would just be so prohibitively expensive. But animated, completely different story.
Yeah, you could get a much more epic scope in animation than you could in live action.
I mean, in the animated, you could truly see the extent of a red-cored vampire transitioning from a human being into this bloated bat monster, and of giant creatures and trolls destroying buildings. Or I think you could also really get the scope of the power and the majesty that is Mab.
Oh, yeah, Mab is the queen.
Mab is queen.
Maeve is the Winter Lady.
Yep. But the Winter Court ladies, to show just how beautiful but deadly they are. Also, in an animated series, you could get an idea of the craziness that is the Never Never. And also all of the wonderful effects of the spells that Dresden does on a daily basis. So I don't think I'd want to see it in a Japanese anime style.
No.
I would like more traditional, like Western style look animation for this one, but
do you want to see Don like Bluth do it?
With no, okay. The only exception I would say is I've been trying to rack my brain for an animation style I would see it in. The only way I would want to see it in a Japanese anime style is if it was done by the same people who animated Cowboy Bebop.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, I could see Dresden as a Spike Siegel, that look. Other than that,
see, now I'm just stuck on wondering who would we cast Dom DeLuise as.
Oh, that's easy.
I mean, Bob the Skull seems like an easy one.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Bob the Skull.
In my head, Bob the Skull is always Alan Tudyk. I won't accept anybody else as Bob Then Alan Tudyk.
You know what?
That's my word on that.
Pun intended. Headcanon accepted.
Nice.
Headcanon accepted. So yeah, Harry Dresden animated series. Netflix, Hulu, Prime, somebody, get to work. Well, now that we've talked about what cartoons we desperately want to see, let's head to our main topic of this episode, and we are jumping back into the film club. We're starting a new one of historical fiction movies, and the first one we're going to be taking a look at is the movie The Lion in Winter. It's been brought up here and there on this podcast. In fact, I think it got brought up when we had the guys on the Retro Rewind podcast on.
Oh, come on. We've mentioned them. So you got to mention some other podcast like Saving the Game and Mid-Max. Come on. We got to bring more. Okay, sorry.
We mentioned First Geek 411, so.
Okay. Fair.
But The Lion in Winter is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's from 1968. It stars some people you may have heard of, Peter O'Toole, Katherine Hepburn, Anthony Hopkins, Nigel Terry, Timothy Dalton. It is a phenomenal movie and a fantastic look at early medieval life and court politics. The setting is, it's 1183, and King Henry II has decided that he's going to hold a winter court. He's summoned his 3 sons, Richard, Jeff, and John. He's gotten his wife out of prison. Yes, prison. And is going to have them all together along with the King of France for a wonderful, relaxing, carefree, joyous Christmas weekend. And if you believe any of that last sentence, you're completely wrong.
I mean, sometimes I've heard people talk about how their families are tense during Christmas get-togethers. It's not like this.
Well, we don't know. Maybe Henry actually does find this kind of interaction relaxing.
To set the stage for what Christmas would be like, as his wife, Queen Eleanor, is bringing Christmas presents to put under the tree. Henry takes one and says, "What did you get me? It's heavy. It's my tombstone. Eleanor, you spoil me."
And he's not saying that in a jovial, like, he's joking, but it's also, like, the dark humor is there because these two do not love each other.
Because the last time that he saw her, the reason she's locked up is because she led one too many civil wars against him.
And that's not just a little bit of idiom there. She actually did it multiple times. I think there were, 3 or 4 rebellions that she led.
And she would have done more. But we'll get more into that later.
Yeah, before we really take a deep dive on this film, now that you know a little bit of what The Lion in Winter is about, we wanted to take a step back and talk just a little bit about historical fiction in general. And historical fiction, at least for me, it's a lot of fun. Though it's really important to recognize it for what it is. It is fiction set in an historical setting using characters that are analogs for real people. And I like historical fiction, but it's important to remember that its primary function is to tell a story. And I don't think it's a failing of a book or a film when the author departs from history to make good media.
If it tells a great story, then those departures are forgivable, especially if the movie inspires you to pick up a book and research more about the events and the people that are within that film. I mean, whether the movie ended up being good or bad, at some level it succeeded because it made you learn. A lesson I learned the hard way when I was 18 years old. I saw Braveheart for the first time, and I really did think that Scotsmen wore kilts in the 13th, 14th century.
Or that there was such a thing as a commoner with their own lands. I don't know how many times
Exactly.
I had to explain to people, like, that's a commoner with their own lands is called a noble. Anyway. And that really brings me to the point that, I wanted to put out there, is that it's not a failing in the film if it doesn't educate you, because it's not supposed to be educational. It does reflect some of our failings when we substitute this narrative that's in the media to fill in our own lack of understanding of the actual people and events. We can hold the actual events as interesting and important without diminishing a well-told story but we also have to understand that when we're engaging these stories, we're going for a story, not a documentary, and not an education.
I would appreciate it sometimes, though, if like there were a bibliography included.
Yeah. Although if a bibliography were included for this movie and it was done in a video format, it would be 3 times as long as the movie itself. I mean,
it's not a bad thing, James. It's not.
It's
that's
but
okay. That's a good thing.
It is I mean, it would be longer than all of the extra material DVDs for Lord of the Rings.
I don't necessarily need it to be like a historical analysis, actual video, but you've got this nice long credit sequence at the end. You could just pop some book titles in there and say, hey, if you want to learn more about Henry II, read this book.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll love that.
Matter of fact, there was a project that I wanted to do a while back. It was kind of a light steampunk thing set in the Napoleonic Wars. And one of the things that I wanted to do with it is every time I had a character that I brought up, like just give a couple little bibliography notes in the credits to say, hey, if you want to learn more about Lucien Bonaparte, read this book.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I like it.
Now, with all of this said, that this is historical fiction is supposed to be story and not history, I think that this film in particular is really interesting as a piece of fiction because some of the actual real-life historical tidbits really do accent parts of this film, such as John's bumbling and Eleanor's strength.
And it's also a little bit more accessible as historical fiction because a lot of people are already familiar with Richard through his appearance in the Robin Hood stories and Ivanhoe. So you already know, oh, Richard the Lionheart, I know who that is. This is kind of like the prequel for Ivanhoe.
And if they know Richard through those, they also know about John. John is bumbling, that he's inherently evil and the quintessential bad guy of the stories.
And he is king.
I think I have the Disney Robin Hood. I think, yeah. The thing is that this does play so well into just going and watching the Disney Robin Hood from this, just because of how extra John is.
I've got a dirty thumb.
This film is also really interesting because it's late enough in the historical record that we have some really good documentation as to what's gone on, but it's also early enough that there are gaps that allow historians to come up with some really fascinating theories about the relationships. And those theories actually seem to have found their way into the film to serve as inspiration for a lot of the ways that the characters have interacted with each other, like namely Richard and Louis.
Yep.
Not Louis.
The reason we have so many records and so many accounts is because Henry spent so much time traveling across England and France and everything that he owned, doing so much. The man could not sit still if his life depended on it. He traveled, passing laws, pronouncing judgments, waging wars, putting down rebellions. He was a very hands-on king, and because of that, we know a lot about the man and how he interacted with people.
And he is fundamentally a people person. Or maybe not.
Well, insofar as that he understands people and he knows how to interact with them to get what he wants. Yeah, he's a people person.
Yeah.
Okay. I love people. I want to rule them all. Anyway. All right. So the question that we ask with all of our film club films, why this film? And my answer, because I'd never seen this before.
Because me and Bryan said so.
Yeah, and you are right.
I keep a list, as many people in the SCA do, of required movies to watch if you're interested in the SCA or in the SCA. And Lion in Winter, for me, it's at the top. There's such movies as The Adventures of Robin Hood, A Knight's Tale, Braveheart, Blackadder, El Cid, Elizabeth, Hamlet, but Lion in Winter, for me personally, and for a lot of people as well, it sits at the top. And a big reason it stands above all these other historical fiction titles is because of its exceptionally well-written dialogue.
And the dialogue is a testament to its origin. It was originally a Broadway production where the script is driving everything in a stage play.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get the benefit of clever cinematography and special effects and so forth to support your story.
And it's funny, there were a couple of times when we were watching this film where my wife stopped and said, is this originally on the stage? Because this looks like this is from the stage, just because of some of the blocking. And it's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
And also, with this being such a fundamentally character-driven film, it takes place over a very short period of time. It's primarily in one location. Without this solid interaction between these characters and without that amazing dialogue, this film could have flopped.
Yeah. The chemistry between these actors, in addition to their just fantastic individual portrayals, elevated an already exceptional script to new heights, especially the interactions we see between Henry and Eleanor, of course, played by Peter O'Toole and Katherine Hepburn. We learned through the dialogue about their past and its ups and downs. And you can come into this not really having any idea who Henry and Eleanor are. And this movie, through the dialogue, gives you their backstory. But it's through their delivery, their reactions, that pure, unadulterated chemistry that we feel the weight of their shared history. I mean, you feel it in their eyes when they stare at each other for a few moments. And you kind of get the sense that these are the only two real adults in the room. They'll tell the world one thing, and only each other will they tell the truth. Oh, they'll still lie to each other, and they do it several times throughout the film. But you also get a sense that the few times that truth actually comes out of their mouths is when they're with each other in a small moment of quiet and playful conversations. In that truth, we also learn that love still exists between them, and that for all her scheming, all of her civil wars that she's led, and everything that she's done to Henry, one of the few things that she wants is Henry back.
It's funny because I didn't believe her. Is that the intent of the writer and the director? Because I thought this is just one more thing that she is putting out there in order to either lull him into a sense of confidence, for him to let his guard down for a moment. I mean, I get that they love the chess game that they play with each other, but do they love each other or do they love the chess game?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I wonder, the impression that I got from Eleanor is that she really does want him back, but if she had him, she would not be able to stop herself from betraying him again.
Mm-hmm.
It may be what she says she wants, and it may be something that she believes she wants, but her actions, I think, would counteract her desires.
One thing I will mention that I think lended to her portrayal is that just not long before they shot this movie, Katherine Hepburn had just lost her husband, a well-known actor by the name of Spencer Tracy. And part of the reason she took this role of a woman who has, for all intents and purposes, lost her husband. And that appealed to her. And so I think some of that emotion carried over into her performance.
Which was incredible.
It was. I mean, there's a reason that she was awarded an Oscar for this movie.
And let's also use that to just highlight that, again, also why this film, because the dialogue was so exceptionally well written. I mean, it is just incredible.
The first time that she sees her three sons in years, my little darlings, when they hear that Philip, the King of France, is coming, she says, I could have been his mother. Poor Louis. If I had given him sons instead of all of those little girls, I would have had to settle for being Queen of France, and we should have never met. Such is the role of sex in politics.
Right. I mean,
her delivery,
kind of true.
Her delivery was near perfect every single time.
It was really incredible. Eleanor has some of the most scourging lines and retorts in this film. And Katherine Hepburn was just so cynically bright and smiling while dripping with venom the entire film. it was just incredible to watch.
Let's use that as a springboard to really delve into the characters that we meet in this movie. I say let's start off with the very first one we see, and that is Good King Henry II.
So O'Toole's performance as Henry is extremely complex. You get a really good sense of the entitlement that comes from being a king. The way he believes that the world revolves around him and his desires. And his interactions with his family and with Alice. We haven't mentioned Alice yet. She's his mistress, and also the half-sister of Philip, King of France, who has been
betrothed
to whoever is supposed to be the next King of England, which that's the question that's in the air through the entire film is who's going to be designated the heir. But he is very honest with her, and he says that, I love you, but I'm going to dispose of your what's the word, your
dowry.
Right. As I see fit, as befits what the nation needs and what I need as the king. And he's very honest in equating England with himself.
Yeah.
And it seems sociopathic. I mean, he's so extremely self-focused. And given that he's O'Toole's delivery of his lines, he makes him an extremely human person. And it's all but impossible to separate when you cannot tell when he's telling the truth and when he's lying. 98% of the time he is lying. I don't think he's got more than a couple of honest lines in the entire movie. But it's this essential trait that's permitted him to defend his throne for as long as he has.
I think it's interesting that you say that it's almost sociopathic, or it seems sociopathic. And it's not just sociopathic, because the film seems to go to great lengths in the very opening to show that he's a shrewd ruler, but also that he is above any sort of rule of law or any sort of relatable morality.
Oh, there's a scene later where he's brought candles to illuminate a dark place, and he says, I stole them from the church. Jesus won't mind, and the chaplain works for me.
The thing that struck me is that he is, we're just establishing his character with Alice, and he's talking about all the people that he has. I mean, I'm pretty sure that he's implying all the people that he has had carnal relations with. And he just makes this wide sweeping list, including courtiers and
Contessas, milkmaids, and
little boys. And I'm like, okay, all right. So we are establishing character right here, saying to this woman, but all of these, none of them have I loved such as you. You know, something to that effect. Like, okay.
That's not as much of a compliment as you think it is, my lord.
Yeah, Hallmark is not putting that on the Valentine
No, they're
cards.
not. We talk about, is he sociopathic? Does he believe that he is above the law? The thing is, for pretty much a large portion of his country, he's the one who wrote the law. Henry is a man who built an empire through sheer force of will. Well, that and marrying landed women. And O'Toole plays him as a man who knows it. He's very aware of what he's done and what he's capable of. To preserve that empire, he's going to lie, he's going to cheat, he's going to steal, he's going to go to almost, emphasis on the almost, any lengths to secure it. He even says, I've snapped and plotted all my life. There's no other way to be king, alive, and 50 all at once.
Right.
And it's that almost that is the real crux of his character in this film, because it comes to the point where he's decided that he's going to do something reprehensible. He's going to murder all three of his sons, but there's still some empathy in him. He can't do it. I mean, he's got the sword in the air, but he can't bring it down. He can't kill his own son.
And you get even though the scene has you questioning it, he gives you a bit of a clue that he still can't do it. I mean, he looks at Alice and says, would you tell a child of yours that they have seen the sun for the last time?
And I'm still wondering, when he went into that cellar, what his intention was. I mean, did he plan to change his mind? Was that all just part of the theatrics? Because he's perfectly capable of being...
And he loves his theatrics.
Yeah. But I really don't know if that was his intention, if he was going to if he went down there to kill them or not. And of course, the presence of the knives in the scene probably changed his trajectory a bit.
We'll never know. We'll never know if he went down thinking that he might try reasoning, informing him that they're going to stay locked up. But whatever he had in his mind went out the window when he saw Eleanor among them. And the moment that he saw her with them, he knew, welp, we're improvising.
Well, he said it himself that he knows how it's going to begin and he knows where it's going to end, but he has no idea what's going to happen in the middle. And I think that maybe that was another case of that situation where I went down here to do one thing, but I don't know how I'm going to get from here to there.
Mm-hmm. And therefore I, Henry, by the grace of God, King of the English, Lord of Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, Count of Anjou, Brittany, Poitiers, Anjou, and Normandy, Maine, Gascony, and Aquitaine, sentence you to death, done this Christmas day on Chinon in God's year 1183. Even though I know history, and even though I knew what was going to happen with all these characters, that moment where he's standing in front of Richard, sword in the air, a manic look in his eye, and the music swelling, I questioned, is he going to kill his own son?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's one of the beautiful things about this as a piece of historical fiction. Even if you know the history, you know where it begins, you know who winds up succeeding him as king, but you know where it begins, you know where it's going to end, but you don't know how it's going to get there. And that's great, because we're along with the character for the journey.
Such is the power of these performances that it draws you in so completely that you just accept what is happening on screen as what happened.
Right.
I should make mention before we shift to another character, this is actually the second time that Peter O'Toole has played Henry II. Just 4 years prior, in 1964, in the movie Beckett.
Oh, how interesting.
Also a very good piece of historical fiction.
Absolutely.
So go check out the prequel. Oh, wait.
And there he's very competitive with his wife Eleanor as well. Not played by Katherine Hepburn. That just would have been too good.
But speaking of Eleanor.
Well, Hepburn, I mean, I will watch any movie with Katherine Hepburn in it. I think she's brilliant. And this is one where she was really given free rein, pun intended, to really chew the scenery. And I don't think that there's very many people who could have shared the screen with her as well as O'Toole. I mean, there is some power in this performance, and I think most actors would have just been eclipsed by her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I thought he did a great job of meeting her on that level every single time.
And that from the first moments that we're seeing her, she's got that smile, and it's not a smile of happiness. She's never smiling because she's likes what's going on. And she's showing her teeth. This is a predator's.
Can you read love in this? And she smiles at him. And he's like, eternal love. As they're going out to meet the barons. She's smiling and waving to all their people. What do you want, Henry? A little peace. A little? Why so modest? How about eternal peace? There's a thought. Doesn't break facial expression once. Not a single time.
And the thing is, it is just so witty and so well delivered that it is just on point every single time. It's amazing.
Yep. You realize she's the most clever and deadly of all of them.
Yes.
It's too bad that she was born a woman and had to settle for being Queen of France and then England. And Hepburn plays her expertly as a woman who walks with ruthlessness and humor hand in hand. Deadly humor. I mean, at an exchange with Henry, when he informs her that he is going to divorce her and marry Alice himself and have new sons. And Eleanor tells him, when you die, which is regrettable but necessary, what will happen to frail Alice and her puny prince? You think Richard's going to wait for your grotesque to grow? Oh, you wouldn't let him do a thing like that. Let him. I'd push him through the nursery door. You're not that cruel. Don't fret. We'll wait until you're dead to do it. Eleanor, what do you want? Just what you want. A king for a son. You can make more. I can't. You think I want to disappear? One son is all I've got, and you can blot him out and call me cruel? For these 10 years, you've lived with everything I have lost and loved another woman through it all, and I am cruel? I could peel you like a pear, and God himself would call it just.
Wow. And I think that in this dialogue, you actually highlight a couple of things here. Like you start this off, well, it's too bad that she was born a woman. She laments such a thing herself here, that she is a political pawn based on the European politics, where she is a brilliant tactician and leader. Unfortunately, she's in this machination that she does not have the full control that her will her will to power would exercise.
And I will say one more thing about the lines I just read. You can write those lines, and anyone can read them, but it takes someone like Katherine Hepburn to really bring them to life.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Richard.
First, can we give it up to now Sir Anthony Hopkins in his first major movie role?
You know, for the bulk of the movie, I felt like he was not really delivering. It wasn't until we got into that last scene in Philip's bedroom where his emotion really came to the fore, and you thought, oh, there's Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering where he was this whole film.
And for the most of the film, his purpose was to be on screen and to be strong and to look like he is the future king of England.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he did that magnificently.
He did.
He was very regal.
I mean, Richard he's a legend in English history, whether he deserves it or not. And while not a king yet at this time, Richard has made a name for himself. He's traveled across many parts of France and Europe, and he's won battle after battle. He's faced his brothers in combat and won. He's gearing up to face his father. One point I wanted to make is to the character of Richard. We're coming back to the scene in the basement where the knives have come out. Literally. All three of the sons have one. Richard has one. And the time for talking is done. Now it's time to see what's really going to happen. Is Henry going to kill his sons? Are the sons going to try to kill their father? Henry looks at Richard and is goading him on. Oh, come on. You're Richard. And Richard looks at him, points back, a look of utter caution on his face. But you're Henry. More than anyone else, these two men of action know completely what the other is capable of.
And meanwhile, John and Jeffrey are cowering in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
Especially John.
Well, actually, no. In that scene, I saw Jeffrey as the one cowering back because John, as we see at the beginning of the film, he's actually had some combat training with his father and more. Jeffrey, I don't see him ever holding a sword. But anyway, back to the scene. So much is spoken in those few words. Come on, you're Richard, but you're Henry. It was so well done, so expertly delivered. It stood out to me. Let's continue. And Hopkins played him with that resolute certainty of his own strength and destiny. I mean, this is a man who knows he will be king.
Until suddenly it seems to be falling apart, or he's going to lose something critical to it at the altar with his blushing bride.
I am next in line. You'll get what Daddy gives you. And speaking of not getting anything, let's talk about Jeffrey.
Oh, poor Jeff. Slighted, ignored, underestimated, and quite evil.
Yes. And he knows he's evil. He knows we know he's evil. We know that he knows that we know he's evil. We're a knowledgeable
They're
family.
All very knowledgeable family.
Yes.
He reminded me somewhat of Don John from Much Ado About Nothing. I kept expecting him to say, if I had my mouth, I would bite.
Jeffrey, this episode will be played by Keanu Reeves.
Oh, dear.
Go watch Much Ado About Nothing, everyone.
The Brown-out version.
Yes, specifically. You know, here's another example of whoever put together this movie. It shows that they did a lot of research into the setting and into the characters themselves. Jeffrey actually had a reputation for treachery. And here he's played as someone that would do that at the drop of a hat. I actually found a historical testimony to his character from a man named Gerald of Wales, stated that he has more aloes than honey in him. His tongue is smoother than oil. His sweet and persuasive eloquence has enabled him to dissolve the firmest alliance, and his powers of language to throw two kingdoms into confusion.
You'd think that with such an upbringing, he would have turned out better.
I love the way he was not quite introduced, because we saw him in his, I don't know, was that a fantasy battle that he was overseeing? Or was that a real thing? I don't know.
I think
it was intended to be a real thing.
No, he actually did command troops into battle at several times, helping put down rebellions and such.
I was curious about that particular scene, though, because he's here and he's directing the battle, and then somebody walks up behind him and says, "Your father has summoned you." He's like, "Wait, did you just walk up to the secret general in this battle and deliver a message?"
Well,
that just struck me as strange.
Well, the person who snuck up behind him is important, and we'll get to that later.
We'll talk about him in a bit. But what I was going to say about it wasn't his introduction, but when he was greeting his parents in the court, that Henry comes up and he gives a long speech about Richard, and he gives a speech about John. He says, "Oh, and Jeff."
Yeah. Oh.
Well, that establishes how he's going to be in this movie.
Sit up straight, John. Richard, don't scowl so much. It makes your jowls big. Jeffrey. That's all.
Moving on.
And that would take us, actually, if we had nothing else to say about Jeffrey, and really, it's fitting that he's the one we talk the least about. Let's move to John. Poor John.
What was the bit about the acne and smelling like manure?
He's got pimples. He's 16 years old. He can't help the pimples. Well, he could have a bath.
It's funny because in fiction, John is often portrayed as lazily, bumbling, blundering, wicked, or otherwise a poor king.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, there's a reason for that.
Whatever could you possibly mean?
So, John, from the moment he was born, you knew he was going to get the short stick. He is the fourth surviving son of Henry and Eleanor. There was Henry the Younger. Well, first off, there was William, but William died at 3. Then there was Henry the Younger. There was Richard, Jeff, and finally John. In fact, when he was young, he was known by many as John Lackland, because they thought once all of the titles and lands had been parceled out, there wouldn't be much left for poor John, hence the Lackland. Later, he kind of thought to be known as Lackland because when he actually finally did become king, he lost a lot of his kingdom. I mean lost.
He didn't lose it. He gave it away. I mean, well, not all of it, but I mean, like he's in political argument with France. Like, oh, I'm tired of France attacking me. Here, take France to make France go away. So, he had half of what we would call modern day France. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, but still, he's like, well, you can have it all back if you quit attacking me.
I mean, we talked earlier about how Henry knew how strong he was and how powerful he was, especially in his dealings with Philip. I mean, at that point, Henry owned more of France than the King of France.
Right.
And what does John do?
I mean, he trips on his shoelaces and hands it back, except he did keep the Aquitaine, which he so poorly mismanaged, they revolted, and he lost that too.
The problem with John is that, and they talk about this in the movie, he's seen as bumbling, as disgusting. He's just staring blank-eyed and open-mouthed so much, which that really bothered me, but well done on the performance. But at one point we see he's working a machine that he made of a little mechanical man chopping off someone's head. He says, I built this. All the parts work. I speak 3 languages. I've studied law. I'm not an idiot. But he is. John, historically, was not a stupid man. He was a very smart man. The problem is that he thought he was smarter than everyone else in the room. He thought he was more clever than anyone else in the room. And it's not just that he didn't think he could be outsmarted. The problem was that he just flat out insulted so many people that it lost him all of France.
Well, let's also not forget, I mean, granted, this is a wonderful thing for the rule of law for common people like you and I, but he was also at the reins when the Magna Carta got signed. And he didn't sign the Magna Carta because he was like, yes, this is a good thing to limit the powers of the king, to make sure that there is a fair written law across the land. He did it because he was being held at sword point from his barons.
Mm-hmm.
And we were fortunate enough to have the Magna Carta come and visit the Museum of Fine Art in Boston.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Oh, it was so cool. And some of the surrounding documentation around it, his venom at having to sign this was just palpable nearly 1,000 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we got to read it, and it was great and awful and great. And it's one of those things. Like, he just, through the major portions of his reign, he doesn't seem to have any agency. Like, he's constantly a victim of his own circumstances. And I think this film does a wonderful job of illustrating that. Now, granted, this caricature that we have of him of being a victim of circumstance, of being a bumbling fool, is over dramatized. Like, let's own that. But it is interesting to see it flavored in history, and the flavoring that history gives is brought to the screen in a particular characterization.
What did Henry say about him at one point? Was his latest treason your idea? I've caught him lying, and I've said he's young. I found him cheating, and I've said he's just a boy. I've watched him steal and whore and whip his servants, and he's not a child. He's the man we made him.
Have we anything more to say about John?
He'd like to be known as John the First, but he'll forever be known as John the Worst.
Beautiful. Okay, so what about Philip? He's not one of the sons, but he has a pretty crucial role in this film.
Mm-hmm.
First, I want to give props to Timothy Dalton.
Oh, yes.
Granted, Philip was the most English Frenchman I've seen on screen since Jean-Luc Picard.
Oui. I will also point out...
What about Cardinal Richelieu by Tim Curry?
Ooh, top three.
Oh, that should have been our film club. Oh, man, most English Frenchmen. Anyway.
As I was saying, I do want to also mention that, along with Anthony Hopkins, this was Timothy Dalton's first major film role as well.
And I think that he portrays this character wonderfully.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's not the one pulling any of the political strings. And he doesn't begin the film like someone who is going to be setting many plans into motion. He's there to react to the circumstances that he's given, but he reacts beautifully and wonderfully.
Yeah.
Very opportunistic.
Yeah. I saw him, he was portrayed as very calculating. He's waiting to see what opportunities present themselves at this winter court. He knows he has to be cautious. As I said, he knows that Henry owns more of France than he does, and he's in a very dangerous situation. He knows he doesn't dare ignore Henry's summons. Henry is too dangerous and too powerful. One thing that is brought up, we talked about Alice and her dowry. Part of her dowry is a piece of land called the Vexin. Henry wants it because it's small, but it's also within marching distance of Paris. Philip is at this winter court because he wants to see the terms of the agreement fulfilled. Either he gets the Vexin back, or Alice is married to the next king of England. And as it's brought up, he says, who is she going to marry? Well, we'll wait and see. Well, then the Vexin will go back to me. Well, see, that's the problem.
It's got my troops all over it.
Anyway, the Vexin's mine. By what right? It's got my troops all over it. That makes it mine. I'm like, yep, that argument's settled.
Yeah, I was really fascinated by that scene in his bedchamber when he's got all three princes stashed behind tapestries, and he's got Henry in the room, and he's the only person in the room who knows everybody who's there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because Richard doesn't know about the other two princes. They know about Richard. Well, I guess they know everybody who's in the room, but they don't have any power to influence the situation. And suddenly, Philip's got all of the cards. He's got all of the information that nobody else has. And he sees that opportunity and he uses it. I don't know exactly what his aim was in revealing his relationship with Richard.
Oh, I do. He knows one of two people is going to get the throne. But if he can do anything to cause these people to continue to squabble, to fight amongst themselves, to kill off each other, that's only going to increase his position.
Yeah, destabilization is a goal in itself.
And also, he's out for revenge any way possible against Henry because of what he views as the crimes that Henry committed against his father, the former King of France.
It still seems like he's... of course, we don't know what other information he has, what other moves he's got planned. But it just seemed like he played that card without a specific and tangible benefit to himself.
Yeah, I wonder about... I've been thinking a bit more about this character, and I think that maybe it's because this film is not predominantly about him. This film is trying to focus on Henry, Eleanor, and their sons. And so I think that he is a cog in this wheel, and he's presented as a snag in the plans, and not really somebody who seems to have a whole lot of agency in himself. I think that the only other person who has less agency in all of this is Alice, whom I just realized we don't even have her in the notes. We should probably say something about her.
She's a MacGuffin, really.
Well, in a play full of knights and kings and bishops, she's the only pawn. And that makes her dangerous.
I don't know. I think that really
I'm quoting the line.
Oh, dang it. Because what I've seen in this is that the only ones playing are really Eleanor and Henry. Everyone else thinks they're a player in the game, but all of them are pawns in their game with each other.
As like I said before, Henry and Eleanor, these two, they're the adults in the room. Everyone else are just the kids playing at power. Well, Henry and Eleanor have actually got the power.
And I'll say this, I'm a little disappointed that Alice didn't have more agency and that she didn't have more character. She was a bit of fluff for Henry to toy with or to play with. He thinks that he loves her, but he thinks that he's loved other people before. And she has a very valuable piece of real estate attached to her name.
Well, she does make a major impact on the plot late in the game. It's when Henry decides, that's it, I'm divorcing my wife, I'm getting a new one. He tells her, come on, we're going to Rome. Why? That's where they keep the Pope, isn't it? He's excommunicated you again, hasn't he? and he tells her that I'm going to marry you. You're going to give me sons. She's like, what about your sons you have now? He's like, don't worry, they're all locked up. The royal sons with the royal port. They can age together. And it goes from being a kind of a mad dash humorous scene to very serious when she tells him, you can never let them out. You can never let them out. I will not see our child killed by your sons. And now Henry, who had it all figured out, he had control of the situation. He just stayed up all night long putting together a wagon train to take them from Chinon to Rome. And suddenly he's realized she's right. Now he has to make a decision. What is he going to do about his sons? And it's Alice who makes him fully realize that.
Yes, she does give him that inspiration and that understanding. I don't see her as acting in her own agency. All she does is tell him something that he should realize. I think it would have been more in line with the rest of the characters if she actually had something to do. Now, and granted, that's me coming at this from a perspective of someone in 2020. How do we view women as agents of their own in our society, and so forth? That's me speaking into that film.
I
which
think
is also
Eleanor had enough agency
off.
For everybody.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, didn't she just?
Oh gosh. The reason I saw her as having finally a bit of her own agency is because she has been a pawn for everybody throughout this movie. First, she was a pawn for Louis, her father, and then for her brother, Philip, and for Henry. Which son are you going to go to? But, while I'm deciding that, I'm going to sleep with you anyway. Finally, because she could have just said, okay, off to Rome we go. I get to be queen now. But she's smart enough to realize what the future entails. And she has a moment of strength to make Henry stop and really examine what it is he's doing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but from a story perspective, she is mostly there to provide an opportunity for Henry and Eleanor to show their values.
Yeah.
She's there to
Such
reflect
as they
them.
are.
Right.
Well, no,
show
values...
what they value.
There you go.
It changes from scene to scene. Just ask Eleanor. I'm locked up with my sons. What mother does not dream of that? Speaking of strong character roles, or people who should have had strong character roles, I want to make quick mention of someone who I mentioned before and is seen briefly throughout this movie. He's had a very limited appearance in media, despite his importance to history. And he is, I think, more interesting than a few of the main characters in this movie, and that is William Marshall. Or should I say Sir William Marshall. He's introduced at the beginning of the film as Captain Marshall, one of Henry's trusted men. And William is considered by many to be the greatest knight who ever lived. It's believed that he defeated over 500 knights on the tourney field. And I could spend this entire episode just talking about him. He served 5 kings of England. He served Henry the Younger, Henry II, Richard, John, and John's son, Henry III. He went from being the younger son of a minor noble to a knight-errant to regent of England before his death. Why there is not a movie or a miniseries about him, I have no idea.
Maybe we should just get a treatment together, James. I mean, this is not hard.
Better people than I have written extensively about the man, both fiction and in nonfiction. But I dearly hope to see it one day. 10 years ago, when Joy and I spent some time in England, when we were in London, I made it a point to find Temple Church, where he was laid to rest, and I found his effigy. It was a very powerful moment for me, and I felt like I was making my own personal pilgrimage. As we get this show posted, I'll post a picture of Marshall's effigy on the Facebook page. There is a reason that he was the one that Henry sent to collect his sons. There's a reason why he was able to just come up behind Geoffrey while Geoffrey was commanding, I say this in air quotes, commanding troops. And you notice that when it came time to throw his sons in the dungeon, they threw a bag over John's head. They snagged Geoffrey out of his bed. But Richard, they sent 2 armed knights and William Marshall with a sword. Because he knows if there's going to be anyone in the castle who's not going to have any problem handling Richard, it's going to be William Marshall.
So what you're saying is that just an SCA fan film about this guy's not going to cut it?
I would accept that too at this point.
Okay, just making sure.
And in the fine traditions of the SCA, it could be like William Marshall versus Miyamoto Musashi.
Oh, absolutely. That could happen. We can make this work.
That's probably happened on some field somewhere. Well, did we have anything to say about any other characters in this movie?
I just wanted to say one thing and a moment of silence for the poor guard, the only person to die in this movie.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, that one guy.
Mm-hmm.
Did they even give him a name? It's kind of like maybe a button I died on Star Trek sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's probably something like Bernard.
Right. But you got to hand it to a movie set in 1183 in which only one person dies.
Of course he has a knife. We all have knives. It's 1183 and we're all barbarians.
Barbarians. It's my favorite line from the movie.
Well, let's take a moment and talk about the production of this movie, about the look and feel of The Lion in Winter. Not a lot of special effects, really. And for a historical fiction produced in 1968, I think this movie actually has a lot going for it. For one, there's no medieval filter applied that seems to wash out the color and give us a world that's shot in basically 50 shades of brown. Now, do browns appear in this movie in the garb? Oh, yes, they do. But the sins, clothing-wise, that this movie commits are not as egregious as I've seen in many more modern, medievally inspired movies. Some of the cuts of the garb aren't that bad. And the world itself is pretty good. You see a lot more color in this movie than you do in some of the more recent ones. The garb ranges from medievally inspired to early Hollywood garb 101 / the Errol Flynn collection.
For the most part, it looks like something that you could actually wear.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like I have to sit in a particular fashion or, the shoulders are going to rip out on my doublet.
And along with that, we see a variety of color, variety of fabrics as well, and it lends to the realism of it. As far as the background as well, the setting is Christmas in 1183. And despite the fact that it takes place in a royal castle Castles are not the bastion of strength. Well, they may be strong, but they're not exactly built for comfort. And the characters in this movie are by no means comfortable, and that is shown in many instances. In almost every room, there's a large roaring fire. As soon as characters walk in, they immediately go to the fire, constantly warming themselves. In fact, it seems that the camera focuses directly on the fire in several scenes. When they're not around a fire, cloaks and blankets are on everyone's shoulders, furs as well. And at the beginning, when he wakes up in the morning, Henry has to break the ice in his bucket of water in his room just so he can wash his face.
And
that was painful to watch.
Yes, that made me so uncomfortable. I wonder if that water actually was ice cold, because if it wasn't, he sure sold it.
I imagine it was, and I imagine they found a freezer, they stuck a bucket of water in there, waited until there was a nice bit of ice in there, he just broke through it, and you notice he really wasn't seriously washing himself. He was just like, pat, 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 tiny little drops on the neck, all while staying wrapped up in his blanket. When you take a look at how the rooms look, they're very simply furnished, mostly wood furniture. They look believable. Are they based on any actual historical designs? No idea, but they look functional and believable for the time. And I got to say, I love, love, love the banquet scene near the beginning when Eleanor arrives and they go down to dinner, Christmas dinner. There's trestle tables along two sides. There's a bonfire in the middle. There's the high table at the end, threshing all over the floor. Are liberties taken? Absolutely. But it looks better than anything I saw on various shows where they played various games behind many thrones.
And one of the things I have to say about the castle is that I'm not an expert on medieval architecture, but it really sold it, and especially when you have these well-worn steps. Now, granted, if it was built for the 1130s, the 1180s, it wouldn't have been as worn as this, but I wonder if they had actually gotten an actual castle to film in, because those steps were so worn that there were grooves in the rock.
Well, actually, much of this film, the vast majority of it, was shot at Montmajour Abbey, which was a Benedictine monastery built in several stages from the 10th to the 18th centuries in southern France.
I was wondering about that because the sets did look really, really authentic.
Well, I got to wondering myself, I'm like, if this was built on a soundstage in Hollywood, they really knocked it out of the park. Yeah. I started during the credits where it said, thank you to a certain province in France and to Wales for shooting locations. So I looked online. I'm like, wow, no, they didn't shoot this on a soundstage. They shot this in the south of France in a castle.
Which I got to say, props to their sound people then, because it did not sound like they were shooting in a real, actual stone environment.
I was thinking props to the lighting crew as well.
That too, yes.
They had to redo everything in ADR.
The lighting did not impress me all that much. I thought that they weren't as authentic with lighting as they might have been. Everything was a little bit too well lit, particularly the cellar scene. Because Henry marches in with all these candles, and he's lighting the candles, and he puts them up, and he says, "Oh, that's better." No, dude, it's exactly the same as it was when you came in.
No difference whatsoever.
We commented on...
Well, these wine cellars in France, they want to have a lot of light because they take their wine very serious.
Right. We commented on that a little bit in Lady Hawk, how uneven the lighting situation was there, where sometimes something looked like it was actually shot at night, and sometimes they were doing some awful day for night. And I think this one suffered it wasn't as uneven as Lady Hawk, but the supposedly night shots never looked like they were actually night.
No, even though
the places where they're supposed to be in darkness, they were perfectly well lit.
Yeah, Henry's trying to get everyone roused in the middle of the night, and he's carrying around a torch, and yeah, he doesn't need the torch.
Right. That's totally superfluous, dude. We've got all of these kinos shooting at us.
Which is another Hollywood medieval trope. Like, oh, everyone had torches. That's how they walked around. No, they didn't.
No. Have you ever heard of a lantern?
Yeah.
It's a really, really old technology.
Yeah. Why do they keep putting... The simple answer is because torches look cool.
And that is true.
You're not wrong.
I mean, if I have a choice, I'd love to be carrying around a stick that's on fire all the time. I mean,
who wouldn't? Yeah.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah, they do not let you on the tee with that here in Boston.
Well, how do you know until you've tried, Mike?
Yeah, that's what I said.
They kind of frown on it in airports too.
But I got the flame going well enough that it's not smoking. I thought we were good.
I should also add, they don't care for it too much at my kid's daycare either. Just,
Right. We're going to see that in the next revision in the TSA guidelines.
Like, we had to, there's no torches allowed inside the secure area, Bryan.
It names
I'm
him
always
personally.
curious about that list because it says that swords aren't allowed, but also sabers. It's like, so who was it that came onto the airplane saying, no, this isn't a sword, this is a saber?
Well, there's a lot of pedantic people in the SCA, so I'm just going to leave it at that.
And they don't really care for the pedants in the TSA, so...
Right. Well, that's very nice, sir, that you have a saber. I've got a taser. But that's a little off topic.
Yeah. So I've talked about what the background looks like and some of the clothing, but I mean, for as far as the production itself, I mean, I don't know. Were there any effects that you guys know about? Anything else interesting production-wise that we want to mention?
I was curious about one particular shot. There was a shot up angle of Henry walking along the battlements, and the sky is like purple. And I wondered if that was what exactly was going on there. I have a feeling it was an artifact of the day for night that they were doing, that it was actually not dusk as it appeared to be, and they had to just color time it weirdly. But there was also a couple of other shots. One of them in particular that I noticed it on, and I wanted to go back and watch again and see if I could pick it up on others. But there's this shot that's in very, very deep focus, or at least it looks like it's in deep focus, where you've got Henry in the background, and I think it was Alice in the foreground, and they're both in focus. But if you look in the area of the frame between them, it's out of focus. And this is what's called a split diopter lens, where they actually cut a lens in half, and each half of it has a different focal length. So you can focus on something in the background with half of the lens and something in the foreground with the other half. And it was a really, really good example of a split diopter in production. And I first became aware of this particular technique when I was watching a documentary on, of all things, Toy Story 4, where they actually made synthetic CG split diopter lenses so that they could get their lovely depth of field thing going on. And it was a really fascinating documentary because they talked about the way they chose different lenses for Woody and for Bo to emphasize their characters. But then they had a shot where both of them were in it, and they used the split diopter so that they could get both of them in focus with different qualities on each one. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah. I was first exposed to that filmmaking technique during the recording of episode 36 of the Geek at Arms podcast. So.
Yeah, but it was kind of exciting to me personally to see, oh, hey, wow, that's a split diopter lens. But overall, the cinematography on this film was fantastic. I mean, the lighting, the modeling of the faces, as unrealistic as it was to have, all of these well-lit characters in places where there could not possibly have been that much light, the effect of it was very, very beautiful. And a lot of times
there should have been like 70 more candles in each room to get that type of light.
Right.
Well, it's interesting is during the filming of Lord of the Rings, I believe it was the guy who played Sam, Sean Astin.
Yeah.
Is that his name? I think was talking to some of the lighting guys. That's about like, okay, well, we're in this kind of dungeon-esque sort of room, and there's the light there. Where is the light coming from? Like in the scene, like where is it coming from? And as they're hanging it up, somebody just turns to us. Same place as the theme music.
That's one of the things I appreciate about Sean Astin is he's really, really interested in every aspect of the craft.
I wish he would have given them that question in that scene in the Two Towers where Wormtongue is up in Orthanc with Saruman and they're talking, and for some reason Wormtongue is carrying around a candlestick with a tiny little candle on it, little flame in a perfectly lit room. I'm like, why? Why? Did someone think he needs something to do with his hands? Was he making big hands every single time he talked, and you just had to put something in his right hand? It just made no sense to me. And it really, it shouldn't have bothered me that much, but it did.
Give that guy something to hold because he keeps picking up all the props in this scene.
Christopher Lee turned around, and there's Wormtongue holding his staff time and time again.
Is that Brad Dourif?
Yeah.
What was that guy's name?
I think so.
That was something in Stargate that they had to be really careful about how they were dressing their sets, because every time Richard Dean Anderson came into the room, he would just pick stuff up and play with it. Oh, no. So it's like, okay, well, in this scene, make sure that there's nothing on the table because we want the focus to be on the characters and not on Rick playing with stuff.
Oh my gosh. See, that's why I show up here as these little bits of film craft that I would never have known otherwise.
What were we talking about? Some movie with Anthony Hopkins?
I don't know. I thought we were talking about lenses. Can we go back to that? That was really cool.
We were just discussing how really this is all a commentary about how Henry just wish he hadn't married at all. Just never at all. Just wish he'd never met a gal. And he even says as much. I want no women in my life. Oh, you're tired. I could have conquered Europe. All of it. But I had women in my life.
But let a woman in your life? Him and Henry Higgins.
Yeah.
Oh, Henry.
Well, we'll end it on his last line. Well, not his last line, but one other of my favorite lines. And you certainly see the truth of it throughout the entire movie. Oh, God, but I do love being king. And I certainly loved watching Peter O'Toole love being king.
Indeed.
So was there any last thoughts we wanted to give on this movie?
Probably not.
Unless you're picking up my cat in the background here.
Yes, he's very vocal about it.
Yeah, actually, he's like, dude, I have not been fed. Dude, I have not been fed. Dude, my feeding time is at 5 o'clock. I've not been fed. Hey, do you know what time it is? 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 Like, yes, shut up. I'm trying to record a podcast.
You know, that does remind me, Henry himself ignored his pets, too. There were all sorts of doggies all throughout this movie, and never once did they get pet, and all they wanted was love and affection.
Oh my gosh. Okay, seriously, there was one scene when he is coming down the steps and it's like, my boys, and that greyhound is looking at him with that like cocked head, flop forward ears that I love so much. Like, I'm a good boy. Like, yes, sure, but I've lost my boys. Like, oh, I go find your boys. Yeah. They're like, over here. I found your boys. Like, no, dog.
There's a good boy at your feet. You pet him.
The way that one dog just goes after that chicken in the first third of the film, I was like, wow. Like, I need to check to see if there were any chickens harmed.
Yeah, I was about to say, I didn't
film.
see that statement at the end of the credits.
Because
I'm always curious about if there was an animal harmed in the making of this film, would they tell us about it?
Well, there was, but it was just John, so no one cares. I mean, even Eleanor says as much. Henry, I have a confession. Yes? I don't much like our children.
Not like our children.
All right, before I just keep on quoting it incessantly, which I've talked about him before in this podcast.
Once again from
the top. I've talked about my friend Godwin on this show. He and I will quote this movie incessantly to each other. So before I start doing it over and over again, let's just wrap it up saying, I love this movie. If you are curious any about the time, the politics, and the characters of the 12th century, or if you just love a good drama, a good dialogue and character-driven drama, check out the movie The Lion in Winter. And that will lead us to our zombie apocalypse plan of the week. Mike, I'm vilifying you for goodness sake, so pay attention and tell us what to do.
Okay, what we're going to do this time is really, it is not so much a matter of how much land and area the zombies occupy, so long as we keep the Aquitaine. As long as we've got that, nothing else matters.
It's the richest province in the land. I'm all for that, but I don't know, the person attached to it, she's a little bit of a drama queen.
I mean, heck, the zombies are afraid of her, so, you know.
Well, that will wrap up our episode. I want to thank you all for listening in. Make sure you check us out online at geekatarms.com, at facebook.com/geekatarms. And Mike, what's our Twitter handle?
We are ArmsGeek on Twitter.
And finally, from Bryan, Mike, and James, be safe, be blessed, and be geeky.
Thanks for listening to Geek at Arms. Music for this podcast was provided by Incompetech.com. For more, check us out at Facebook.com/Geek at Arms. Give us a like and maybe even subscribe to us on iTunes. That would be awesome.